You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with Jon Gallo, bringing you news stories about Long Island and about Long Islanders. And now we're very grateful to be joined once again by Newsday's Albany Bureau Chief, Yancey Roy. Hello, Yancey.
Hi, Bill.
And,
How are you?
Oh, boy, good, but a lot of things have changed since we spoke to you just last week. So,
yeah, we thought that was as big of a news week we'd get for a little while. I know your colleague Faith Jesse put out, I think, a meme of, kind of look at all the headlines that came out that week and kind of what the newsroom was like. And certainly, I think a lot of people can relate to, again, just wow. A lot of things were unexpected there with Governor Cuomo announcing his resignation. So can you just recap the reaction that you're hearing? Because it didn't just catch, kind of casual viewers, but also a lot of the invested politicos by a bit of surprise.
Well, yes and no. I mean, in the sort of like the larger, bigger sense of, the idea of Governor Cuomo resigning from office and a guy who had wanted the office so much for so long and relinquishing it, that's, yes, a surprise. But digging down into the particulars and how this unfolded, early on after the Attorney General's report about sexual harassment came out, I mean, remember Joe Biden had been, Jay Jacobs, all the Democrats up and down the line had been saying resign, and he'd held on. But what I'm getting to is Sunday night at late, word broke about the resignation of Melissa DeRosa, his top aide, arguably his fiercest loyalist in the whole group, who's come under criticism herself for her role in this. But she resigned. And I think that was taken as a sign to his inner circle was saying, you got to resign or you're going to be impeached. And I think folks took that as a sign when your top advisor says she's throwing in a towel, they're trying to make it clear to you that this is going no further. So I think that from the moment that happened, everyone was probably on high alert that this was a possibility, not knowing for sure if the governor would resign, but certainly on high alert that it was sounding more and more probable.
Yeah. Okay. No, that definitely is true. And definitely, as we discussed, the timing on the AG's report, that was a bit surprising. But once you see some of those other kind of key supporters that were still the few in his corner, like Melissa DeRosa, leave, like you said, certainly maybe the writing was on the wall. And a big part of that may have been the impact of him actually resigning now on the prospect of impeachment carrying further. I know there's been discussion on if he, in theory, is fully resigned and out of office by the time that they try to move forward. Obviously, the judiciary is still kind of going through stuff today, and I know there's a deadline for him to submit evidence related to that kind of report or investigation, but that he might be able to somewhat avert, kind of being barred from running for office and things like that in the future. So can you kind of lay that out on where that stands?
Yeah, you bring up another point. Besides Melissa DeRosa resigning late Sunday, the other thing that happened in the walk-up to the resignation was that Monday, the Assembly Impeachment Committee met and came out and outlined a rough but concrete kind of schedule about how it might proceed, indicating that it was very, very likely that they were going to vote to bring impeachment charges against the governor by the end of the month. And if that was the case, then his career in that sense was doomed, because we had written a story and others had written that if a trial was in the Senate, 59 of the 63 senators had already said he should go. So in that sense, the writing was also on the wall. So you had the resignation of DeRosa Sunday night, and then Monday, the Assembly saying, here's how we're going to proceed. We're going to have a meeting next Monday. We might have a hearing, and we're going to probably vote by the end of the month. So that made it concrete, and the governor resigned the next day. Now, what you're referring to is there's still a little bit of unknown here. The Assembly Impeachment Committee is still enjoined. It's not disbanded. They still have a scheduled meeting this Monday. There are a number of legislators who want to press on with impeachment. mainly so that the result would be that the legislature can bar him from ever running again. But at the same time, there are people in the assembly, and there are some constitutional lawyers out there that we talked to in one of the stories this week that say the state constitution seems to read that once someone leaves office, impeachment is not an option. So it's unclear if they would be able to go forward. I think what you're seeing now is a little bit of things at play here, because the governor said he would resign as effective August 24th. I think, frankly, folks are waiting for him to actually put in that letter and actually give it to the Secretary of State so that it's therefore official. And that might alter I can't say it will or it won't, but once that's actually in, that may or may not impact some of the opinions of the assembly members on whether they want to go forward. So I think there's some that want to see the letter in,
Right.
And then make a decision.
Right, and the pressure that they've got going against them is people complaining that if they do that, they'll be spending millions of dollars unnecessarily because he's already out of office.
Right. There's two arguments. One, can you legally do it? And then two, do you really want to go through a month, 2 months of a process where you're going to be paying the lawyers a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars? You're going to be paying all these per diems for the legislature and all this other thing. You would what, have to ask the women to come testify publicly? I don't know. Maybe some do, maybe some don't. And from a Democratic Party standpoint, the Republicans would probably like to do this. Democrats would be all worried about, will this have any spillover effect against Kathy Hochul, who will be trying to get up and running and try to set a completely new tone as governor, and will this drag her down? So you've got some political calculations to think about there too.
Right. And with that impeachment, can they do something like make a caveat that he can never run again? I mean, could that be?
It's clear that if wouldn't resign and would still be in office, yes, they could definitely impeach him and pass concur. I don't know if it'd be a form of a resolution or exactly what the mechanics would be, but take action and say you cannot run for public office anymore. Now that's if he's still in office. If he's now resigned and gone, that's where constitutional scholars say, wait a minute, I don't know that you can do that.
Yeah. Okay. But at this moment in time, he hasn't really formally given that resignation.
As we speak at this moment, no. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. And okay. Off the point that you mentioned there, Yancey, that I know obviously the Republican delegation has been, the whole time kind of calling for him to step down and for further impeachment. But it's not just the Republican delegation. There's still a number of progressives, of course, who are still beating that drum and trying to see further accountability. So do you think that coalition, do they have potentially the strength to carry it forward, even if some of the more centrist Democrats who kind of, might want to move on from this chapter? Is that what what are you hearing on that?
Well, that's one of the things to see as we go forward. The Republicans will be unified and united going forward, but keep in mind, there are only 43 out of 150 in the Assembly. And the Assembly is kind of per tradition, and the way it works in Albany is the Assembly Democrats control the agenda, and they will only go forward if a majority of Assembly Democrats want to do something, regardless of what the Republicans want to do.
Yep. Okay. And then let's switch gears. Obviously, a lot of this is focused on the former governor, or soon to be former governor, rather. But obviously, we have to talk about the soon to be governor, at the moment still Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, who comes from the Buffalo area, the South Towns, I believe Hamburg, spent time there kind of running initially as a more conservative kind of, blue dog kind of elected, managed to get a seat in a special election versus someone who stepped down. And also then, wound up losing to a congressional delegate who was a big supporter of Trump when I know redistricting kind of came into play. So that said, she's now announced, and of course, the main headline, which reserves the importance, is that she will be the first female, woman governor in the state of New York, which is definitely important history. It's an interesting way for it to come upon us, but nonetheless, that has happened, and she also has announced that she will be running for re-election come 2022. So can you talk about that maybe in the context?
Sure. Yes, it will be historic when she takes the oath of office. She'll be the first female governor in the history of New York State as governor. And at the same time, she's certainly probably not going to have a free ride to the Democratic nomination. As politicians and analysts point out, these kind of like sort of an open seat situation without a clear favorite, those don't happen very often. And if you're a person who has the ambition of being governor, this is your time. And so I would expect to see a lot of Democrats express interest, maybe try to gear up. I mean, who actually launch a campaign? Who knows? That's a long ways down the line. But you already hear a lot of names out there, along with Kathy Hochul, Tish James, Tom Suozzi, congressman from Long Island, Steve Bellone, county executive, Bill de Blasio, the New York mayor, outgoing New York mayor. I mean, some people have mentioned Laura Curran, Nassau County. I mean, if you're looking wide and not throwing out anyone, you could probably come up with at least 8 names of possibilities right now. And so I think why she wanted to say that on her, immediately was kind of to put down a marker to two things. It gets her 2 things. One is in terms of working with the legislature, she's saying, I'm not a lame duck. I'm not just a caretaker that you can try to roll over for the next year. So there's that. Not that they would want to. Would probably be supportive of a Democrat. And then second of all, she's all these other people who might want to run, like just Suozzi and Bellone and Tish James, they're going to have to sit back and wait before doing anything, because with a new governor coming in and an old one departing, it would just be bad form politically to probably walk out there tomorrow and say, I'm running. You kind of got to allow this grace period. And so they know they have to do that. So this allows Hochul to sort of get the jump, if you will. And in fact, she's having a fundraiser this weekend in Buffalo that apparently has gotten a lot more interest, and they had to change the venues because of it.
I bet.
She's also got one out in the Hamptons, which was originally scheduled to be a fundraiser for her for lieutenant governor. Now it takes on much more importance, and there's generated a lot more interest out there too.
Most definitely. And just maybe to the point of her connection to Long Island, I know, again, she doesn't have obviously the same profile as the governor did, but she certainly has spent a fair amount of time on the island, and I guess in terms of also, like you just said, the fact that she has to work with this legislature and that she will be running, and in terms of, trying to show good ability to cooperate with different electeds across the area, but especially in Long Island. What are we thinking in terms of her picking potentially another lieutenant governor? I know there's been a lot of discussion about someone potentially from Long Island or Westchester or New York City, likely, at least as it's being discussed, a person of color, maybe more progressive with her kind of more centrist credibility. So what are your thoughts, or what are you hearing about that as well?
All of that, what you just said. I mean, she said she's going to announce a lieutenant governor within the next couple of weeks before August 24th. I think the political calculus is that it would probably, she's an upstate from Buffalo, kind of moderate Democrat who's become more progressive along the way. But so therefore their calculus might be to perhaps take pick a woman, first of all, as a lieutenant governor, because that would sort of be the first time in history that there's 2 women at the top of state government, a person of color, a downstate person, more progressive. Those are all sort of on the checklist, because it would help you build a team, a 1-2 punch for next year's Democratic primary, and maybe punch back against some of these other candidates who want to take you on.
Of course. And that's interesting, too, when you consider who we talked about last week, Lee Zeldin, the Republican congressman from out there on Long Island, and her being a little more centrist. How does that play potentially versus if she was a more progressive candidate like a Tish James on, the party's decision to put someone at the front of the ticket. But, obviously, the soon-to-be governor, we would think, is going to have a lot of sway in that room in terms of, that the party's decision to an extent. But just in the last minute we have here with you, Yancey, just like you said, her cooperation is important with legislators on these issues that impact everyone, Long Islanders and New Yorkers. So in regards to dealing with COVID, I know she talked about the mask mandate, and also there was an announcement by the Supreme Court last night in terms of the eviction moratorium. So she won't have, obviously, the emergency executive order that Governor Cuomo kind of had, to have that kind of autonomy. So how important is it, like you said, those relationships with all the electeds to try to, deal with these really important issues that still are on our plates and on our minds?
Yeah, well, within the confines of Albany as state government, I mean, job one for her is set a new tone.
Yeah.
And she's promised to not be top down, which is one of the things that Governor Cuomo did in terms of calling all the shots about COVID management. So she's hitting the ground running with a lot of challenges, how to manage COVID. She referred to the spike in cases, and she said might end up with another mask mandate, but she would work with the legislature. The eviction moratorium, the state has one running through the end of August. At the same time, the Cuomo administration has been very, very slow about getting out any of this assistance money to landlords and tenants that the feds gave us way back when. It's hardly gotten out of the door. Here we are, August, second week of August. The deadline's looming. You could see her perhaps working with the legislature. It wouldn't be inconceivable that one of the first things she does with the legislature is maybe push that moratorium back another 30 days or something. It would maybe alleviate a problem for some and also give her a quick political victory with legislators.
Yeah, so that's certainly we will all be watching because we know it impacts people's lives.
Another question.
All right, last one, Bill. Yep.
I read someplace, and it's probably just scuttlebutt, but I'm not sure. Is she going to make 28% less as far as salary goes than the governor?
Interesting.
And if so, why?
You know what? You're catching me off guard. I'd have to double check that.
I don't know. Maybe she already makes that as a lieutenant governor. It may just be 28% less, but someone.
I don't have the salaries memorized off the top of my head.
Yeah.
That is an interesting question in terms of pay parity, especially with the context of the first, woman governor, and obviously everything for gender equity that is related to this whole situation. So certainly we'll look into that as well. And obviously we will follow, and we urge everyone else to follow all your reporting, all your colleagues, Michael Gormley. We saw a lot of great video pieces you did with your colleague, Faith Jesse, recently. And definitely check out the article that he wrote, Yancey Roy, here on August 11th, which he does kind of name out the 5 top issues that the new soon-to-be governor, Kathy Hochul, will be facing in her tenure. So thank you so much, Yancey. We really appreciate you coming in kind of last moment to give us these updates that I think, again, caught a lot of people by surprise. So thank you so much.
We'll see you in the newspaper.
Anytime.
You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. Okay, well, it seems as though the census data came out for Long Island, and let's see what's in the news as concerns that. In a Newsday story, dated August 12th by Newsday staff, Long Island's population grew 3.1% between 2010 and 2020 and continued a 2-decade trend of becoming more diverse, with minorities constituting 3.2% of residents. That's up from 31.3% in 2010, according to data released Thursday by the U.S. Census Bureau. The population gain, 88,812 more Long Islanders, was hailed by local governmental leaders and others who spoke of efforts to overcome 2020 census obstacles caused by the coronavirus pandemic and subsequent national lockdown. Well, the pandemic delayed the Bureau's door-to-door canvassing and led a coalition of Long Island groups to shift efforts aimed at conducting an accurate population count during the lockdown. The 2020 census data released by the Bureau, called redistricting data, provides population counts and a race and ethnicity breakdown for communities nationwide. Lawmakers will use the latest data to reconfigure legislative district maps.
Yeah, that is certainly important. Definitely related to the conversation we just had with Yancey Roy in regards to the upcoming governor's elections and even the county seat elections for the next coming cycles. That'll be important to whoever wins those. But I'll just point out just one other piece of data from it, that the census did show that Long Island's population did increase from a raw count of 2,921,694 from 2,832,882 of the decade prior. So certainly, there's a lot to consider. There's still plurality.
I heard yesterday, there's some news too that we're supposed to lose a congressional seat in New York State.
Yeah, that is going to happen. That's to their point that the pandemic probably deflated a bit of their ability to do what's known as the enumeration process, which is that door-to-door thing where they come and knock on your door, they send you in the mail.
Right.
They unfortunately did find that it wasn't by much. I believe the number was, within the hundreds or less that we wound up missing the count by for having that seat retained. So now there's discussion on where is that seat going to come from. Some are saying it's going to come from upstate. Some are saying it might actually come from Long Island. It might, result in them kind of trying to rework those lines and, one seat maybe drops. But either way, it definitely impacts a lot of aspects of life. And the data comes out every 10 years only. And this is the stuff that a lot of policy will be informed by. There is the American Community Survey, which a lot of people aren't familiar with, which the census does every year, which is actually really fascinating and very intensive in terms of their questions and finding different correlations. A lot of social scientists use it pretty regularly for research. But nonetheless, like I said, certainly we see Long Island is diversifying like the country.
Oh, yeah.
And there still is a plurality, like I said, of our white, Long Islanders out here. But nonetheless, things are certainly, changing throughout the country. So we're going to have to see, like I said, what that really means in terms of funding too, and all these other, kind of important things that come from census data. So we'll look into that more, and obviously that'll be something that'll be discussed for the next 10 years upcoming. But like you said, it's certainly important that people fill out the census, because otherwise, you might just lose a congressional seat and maybe even some funding. So
yeah. You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. Well, we're very happy to be joined once again by Dr. Sara Siddiqui, the pediatrician at NYU Langone Health System in Huntington, and a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Pediatrics at NYU Grossman School of Medicine, and a member of American Academy of Pediatrics on the latest information Long Island residents and parents should know. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
No.
Yeah, and there's a lot to discuss. I know we talked with you earlier in the pandemic, and there were realities then that are slightly different than they are from now. Thankfully, again, infection rates and some other things, hospitalizations still are better than they were at the peak of the pandemic. But nonetheless, the Delta variant and some of the other ones have certainly led to surges in infection rate. And there's a lot of news in terms of vaccines and things like that. So let's just start with maybe, kind of your thoughts on where we're at the current moment and how that kind of plays into the mask guidance from the CDC in that conversation.
So, yes, you're right. I think earlier in the spring, May and June time, we were very positive about where we were going with the pandemic. The infection rates were much less. Everything seemed to be a little bit calmer. We were very hopeful that we were opening up a lot more and kind of getting back to a little bit of a more normalcy. Unfortunately, with this, the increase in infection rate and with the Delta variant specifically, and just more positive cases, we are a little bit more concerned now. And of course, school is starting in a few weeks. And so we need to kind of put measures in place to keep everybody safe and return to school fully. So that's really the number one, I think, measure, or number one important factor that we need to kind of concentrate on, is making sure that we have all our students in school in person.
Okay. And I think, pretty much universally, everyone we speak to agrees with that. We all know, either firsthand or, pretty closely how difficult it is to, try to do the schooling from home, and certainly all the social elements and stuff like that are missed. But let's focus more generally on the mask indoor guidance. I know places like New York City, they haven't fully said that you have to wear the mask indoors, but other cities, it seems like across the country, have kind of put that back in place. So I guess Nassau and Suffolk haven't done that, but there is seemingly, kind of both push for and also kind of negative reaction towards that. So why do you think that is so important? Why do you think that partially would make a difference in all businesses, restaurants, and of course schools too?
So I think part of the issue is what we're seeing in some of the states that kind of have more surge and more hospitalizations. So what's really important is that the reason why we put these protective measures in place, or these layering mitigation measures, is to ultimately reduce hospitalization and reduce mortality. And so we don't want increased burdens on our hospital systems. We also don't want increased patients to be coming in, and we don't want increased children to be coming in. So I think one of the factors about returning to indoor masking is that that's where COVID can spread through respiratory droplets. And by wearing masks and becoming vaccinated and just staying home when you're not feeling well or getting tested, these are all layered mitigation strategies. And I think the reason why we haven't done a full masking mandate indoors for other areas like businesses, we do want some normalcy, some kind of return to normal so that we don't have to think about it all the time. But I think as rates rise of hospitalizations, then we may need to take that into account. And that's probably why other areas are doing that. And we're not there yet, because luckily, even though our cases are rising, our hospitalizations and our mortality is not. But we don't want to get there before we start doing intervention, right? We want to try to prevent.
Definitely. I know when we discussed these issues with you in the past, the idea of those lagging indicators, that you see certain things, and those should be the warning signs that we don't want to see, like you said, those hospitalizations and God forbid the deaths, raised to anywhere near where they were at the peak of the pandemic. So, okay, that makes sense. And then also from your medical perspective, what are your thoughts? Because I know there's been a back and forth, like I said, with the school districts. Suffolk had come out relatively strong in favor of a mask mandate. Nassau was still kind of more, case by case, school district by school district approach. But also Kathy Hochul, the soon to be new governor, has come out pretty strongly saying that she would be in favor of a kind of statewide mask guidance for schools, for everyone, employees and students. But obviously there's also some kind of nuance in terms of her not necessarily having the authority that Governor Cuomo did under the executive order kind of emergency powers. So just what's your take, absolving the politics of it, just from a medical health professional, on where that kind of conversation is at the moment?
I think from a medical standpoint, and specifically pediatrics and being a pediatrician, one of the main issues that's the driving force of encouraging or really having a universal mask policy in the schools specifically is that our youngest and our most vulnerable under 12 or 11 and under population has not given the opportunity of being vaccinated as of yet. And it really is partly to protect children and under-vaccinated people. So those are people that got the vaccine or are protected, but not fully because maybe their immune systems haven't quite had the chance or isn't capable of building a full immunity to COVID or the variant. And so to protect those vulnerable populations within the school districts, and to make sure that we do have 100% in-person students coming into school and not having to have remote learning return again, that would be one of the ways to protect everybody. Like I said, a layered mitigation strategy. So it's not just the masking that's going to protect everybody. It's going to be staying home from when you're sick and getting vaccinated if you're eligible, and washing your hands a lot and practicing hand hygiene and coughing into your, we have to bring back that coughing into your elbow and making sure you cover your face when you sneeze or cough. So those kind of things are going to help. And masking is just one of the things that can help. It's not the only thing. It's not the one measure that's going to make or break us, but it is one of multiple measures that will help.
Of course. And like you said, I know the vaccines, as of now, correct, still the only vaccine that's approved for children between the ages of 12 and 18. Is that the Pfizer shot? Is that correct?
Yes. So Pfizer currently is still EUA, which is emergency use authorized for ages 12 and up. 12 and up all the way, but the other vaccines, Moderna specifically, is 18 and up. So 12 to 17 age group can only have Pfizer at this point. But there are studies, and there is a plan to adopt Moderna as well, because there are studies in place that have been actively including children 2+. And that's been ongoing. So we're avidly waiting for those results, and hopefully we'll get emergency use authorization or even possible FDA full approval for 12+ as well. So we're waiting on that.
What's the status of the Johnson & Johnson shot, the single shot?
Right now, it's still being recommended for ages 18+. And it is the single shot. It does seem to have, it does seem to help protect us. There are some side effects, but all vaccines do have some side effects associated with it. But you have to look at the benefits of getting the vaccine and making it and comparing it to the risks of obtaining the disease. So vaccination doesn't 100% protect anyone, but that is also another layered approach that we use to help protect us and give our immune system a chance to fight it off.
Oh, yes, we spoke to the senior vice president for critical care at Northwell Health. And one of the things she told us was that 90% of the people who were now being treated in hospitals were unvaccinated. The 10% that were there that were vaccinated, apparently the vaccine was less effective in them because they had an underlying condition. So those numbers kind of tell, there it is.
Yeah. So again, one of the many conversations that I have in my practice, and, a lot of people are still concerned about getting the vaccine and deciding whether that's the best thing for them or the best way forward. But it really is one of the things that we use to protect ourselves, right? So I do bring up seatbelts. Seatbelts don't prevent car accidents. They don't prevent you from getting into a crash or anything. But what they do prevent, or what they can prevent if used correctly, is injury, some of the injury. Now, can you get injured in a car crash and still wear a seatbelt? Yes, absolutely. But because we have mandates in place, there are seatbelts in every single car. We have laws in place to protect our kids and our adults that are in a car. We know that seatbelts work, and we know that seatbelts do help prevent some of the tragedy that can be caused. But is it the only measure that protects us? No, we have to follow the rules of the law. We have to follow traffic laws. We have to make sure that we're driving properly. We have to make sure we're not intoxicated while we're driving. So there's other factors that help us. It's not just seatbelts. So vaccinations, not that I'm comparing it exactly, but it's one of the layered mitigation strategies that you use. One of the things that you use to help protect. And the more people that do it, the better off everyone is.
That makes sense. Like I said, collective kind of, risk mitigation strategies, and like I said, kind of the sums of all the parts. So that's fair. And I know there had been discussion, people have been talking about specifically the Delta variant, and how well would these vaccines stand up to that variant, or specifically also the Lambda variant. I know that's out there, and future ones to come. And I know there's been some pretty good data recently on pretty much all of them. I know that Moderna and Pfizer, they did, at first show that there's some waning efficacy potentially, but still, like you just said, it gives you a lot better chances, like you have your seatbelt on, than if you don't and you're into a car crash or get COVID. And I believe even somewhat similar for Johnson & Johnson. I think it wasn't necessarily a peer reviewed, but I know it was South Africa. There was like an actual, in person or in community kind of, sample that showed that it did have good immune response, still to the Delta variant, what one faced. So is that correct? Is that your understanding? Is that what, people need to know to realize that although, again, these other variants, there's a lot of variables, that still, when you get the shot, it protects you, and then there's discussion of boosters, which we'll get into in a moment.
Yes. So the way the vaccinations work, the way that the mRNA technology that's within the Pfizer and Moderna vaccination, and also the Johnson & Johnson, is that the mRNA is it's the map of the spike protein that you're actually getting. So your body is getting not even the actual spike protein from the coronavirus. It's actually getting the map to build it. And then your body builds the spike protein so that it can recognize it when it does come into your body for real. But basically, your body builds the spike protein. And because your body recognizes that that spike protein is foreign, you build antibodies against the spike protein. And what we're seeing with the Delta variant is that it's still similar to the Alpha coronavirus, which is the original one, that it still is effective. But because the Delta variant is so rapidly producing, like it really does, the viral load increases much faster. So it's not that it makes you more sick, but because there's just more particles, the potential is there that you can get sicker faster, and you can also spread it quicker. And so the more your body has some notification to fight it off, the better. But the reason why perhaps the efficacy is decreasing a little bit is because your body has to have a very rapid response rate for the Delta variant. And it depends on your own immune system and how rapidly you can respond to the viral load that's being put onto your system. So that's one of the reasons maybe why it is a little bit decreased. But it's actively something that's being studied avidly. And it is something, the vaccination is still better than not being vaccinated.
Of course. And just to that point, I know, as I've discussed with some other medical professionals, that in terms of also if you're one of the people who still is unvaccinated, and it's showing that potentially, like you said, the nasal, cavity, that it shows such a higher viral load that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the CDC, there was some data about, I think it was in Cape Cod or somewhere, where a lot of people who were vaccinated were shown to have, again, the viral kind of, in their nose. And therefore, if you're unvaccinated and you're around all these people who can spread it even more, wouldn't you be even further at risk now if you're one of those few still holding out?
Right. So I think that study that you're referring to was a party, or I'm not sure if it was a study, but basically it was a result of a July 4th gathering of many vaccinated people, but along with them were unvaccinated people, and there were no masks. They were not wearing masks. And I think that's the issue here, is that can unmasked vaccinated people be spreading the virus? And I think that instance was that, yes, there was some spread because vaccinated people were also in that gathering and unvaccinated mixed. And the viral load in even vaccinated people was there initially. But the thinking is they are looking at it a little bit more closely. And the thinking is that the viral load may be reduced quicker, but you are in that contagious possible period within the first couple of days, whereas an unvaccinated person might be in that contagious period for a little bit longer. But this is very early. This is not something that's confirmed. And that's why it's just safer to start wearing masks inside. And I have to tell you personally, I've been starting to wear my mask inside. I'm vaccinated, but I just worry that I don't want to be one of those people that's responsible of spreading it to someone that's either unvaccinated or children that are unvaccinated.
I'd like to clear something up just to make sure that we get this. Now, I remember New York, we were at 700 cases a day, 700 new cases a day. And then we went down to, 3, 1 or 2. Can we safely say, because I don't think there was a lot of vaccine out yet at the time that those numbers started to come down. So can we safely say that was masks that did that?
I mean, I think that's one of the issues. I think the other thing that we're learning about coronavirus and COVID-19 in particular is that it does seem to have some seasonality to it. All respiratory viruses do have certain times of the year that they spike up and they come down. There are some respiratory viruses that do better in the summer. There are some respiratory viruses that do better in the winter. There's a lot of different factors that play a role into that. And I think we still don't have a good handle on how exactly the weather does affect specifically COVID-19 and specifically the Delta variant. But you're right. Last summer, if you kind of look at the numbers, we were in a much better spot than we were, March of 2020. So the summertime did look a little bit better. But then if you can remember December, January time, we were in like a huge spike. And I think that's the issue, is that there's still we don't have enough data to see the predictability of it. Do we see other respiratory viruses that we can clearly see when it's the worst time? Yes. So influenza virus is something that we see every year we start vaccinations late August into September, and we use data from other parts of the world to determine which parts of the vaccine, which parts of the flu virus will be in the vaccine that year. And, it's kind of, it's a determination based on data, but it's also a determination based on like best guesses. And that's how we kind of fight it every year. We start vaccinations from September into October, and we get ready for the flu season. Now, we don't know when the worst season is for COVID right now. We're still seeing that data. We're still seeing
there's a lot of correlations, and like I said, the novel kind of virus, novel data sets. So certainly that is something that needs to be reemphasized. Let's just remind our listeners that they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and thankfully joined again by Dr. Sara Siddiqui from the NYU Langone Health System, a pediatrician there. And that kind of brings us, as you were just saying, Doctor, into the conversation of booster shots, which is certainly in the news because, as was reported, the CDC just announced that they would kind of authorize for specifically immunocompromised individuals the option of, I believe, just the Pfizer shot, those who got that, a potential third shot. So can you tell our listeners what they need to know about that?
So yes, that is just a recent recommendation based on some of the waning immunity that could be occurring. It's been, for some people in the population, they may have gotten the vaccine early January, February. And for those patients that may be immunocompromised or elderly or not having the ability to fully build immunity even after the 2 doses, it is recommended to get that third shot. And I think it's a good idea. I think that they're going to slowly phase it in to, whoever kind of wants it. But right now it's kind of preferential to the population that is immunocompromised, other medical comorbidities. So definitely they're putting it into your own provider's hands. So you do want to reach out to your own medical provider to see if you are eligible or see if a discussion about it. And I think for the most part, if you think that you're in that category, reach out to your physician to discuss it a little bit more. And that's actively happening. I know NYU Langone just put out an email this morning saying that they're going to be offering that as well. Interesting. So, okay. And, that kind of, to your point of, with a lot of the flu vaccines, people know that as an annual process. Like you said, they kind of do a perspective on what the strains are that are going to, impact, I believe, each hemisphere, and they kind of select then which ones should be part of that vaccine. But another thing, I don't know if you have any thoughts on, but I've heard in other cities, other municipalities, I believe San Francisco and some other ones, where their health departments are authorizing folks who did get the Johnson & Johnson shot to potentially get a second shot of one of the mRNA vaccines. What have you heard about that? And what are your thoughts as a medical professional? I don't know too much about that, to be honest. I know that Johnson & Johnson does have a little bit of lesser efficacy. And so I think to boost everybody up and encourage vaccination and encourage the strongest protection is to offer everybody the option of doing a Pfizer or Moderna booster. There are controlled trials going on regarding mixing of the vaccinations. So there are patients that are enrolled to, if they, for example, got one Pfizer shot, can they get a Moderna shot, and how much would that boost their immunity? If they got a Johnson & Johnson and then they got the Pfizer, is that a booster of the immunity? So I think those are being actively studied. From the way your immune system works, if you give it several ways to build antibodies, it learns, and having more types of antibodies will help protect you a little bit more. I mean, it's kind of boostering your own system. That's why in pediatrics, vaccinations are given repeatedly. So we have, by 6 months, you're given some of the vaccines a few times, starting at 2 months, 4 months, and 6 months. And part of that reasoning is because initially the immune systems are not as strong to build immunity permanently. So you have to booster at repeated times at set intervals so that your immune system becomes stronger and stronger, ultimately resulting in a more lifelong immunity to some of the diseases that we vaccinate for.
Okay, that's important. Like you said, to consider all the other kind of vaccines that, people tend to not really think twice about. You just get, because we don't want to have a world where we still have to battle polio or mumps and, rubella and other things like that. So that's certainly good context. And I guess, Bill, I'm not sure if you had another question right there, but in terms of, just the point of these vaccines, if they do give these boosters, would they likely be trying to cater them to those future strains, to, again, the Delta and the Lambda, et cetera, or would they potentially just be, like for the mRNA, another of the same? Do we know that yet, or?
I think I know that what we're fearful of is having a strain or a variant that is completely outside the vaccine or completely breaking through the vaccination currently. So the mRNA that's currently being offered with the spike protein, perhaps, is it possible that there could be a variant that may be weaker, but just completely bypasses the ability of your immune system to recognize it based on how many changes that it's gone through? So I think that is the issue. And that's why flu vaccine is given annually, because there are some strains that start circulating that weren't in the vaccine last year. And it's not a permanent type of immunity. So your body needs to kind of get a recognizing factor of it prior. So similar to the cold virus, right? Why do we get colds every year? Every year you get, 1 or 2 colds, and it lasts a few weeks. Your body does get rid of it, but there's not really a vaccine for those regular colds, right? Because they mutate and they change, and you can't really build enough of it unless you get exposed to it. So the vaccine, the reason why there's flu vaccine and the reason why we needed to have a COVID vaccine was because it was increasing in morbidity and mortality. And that's why we don't really have a vaccine for colds, because I get that question a lot too. Why aren't there a vaccine for the regular cold? Well, one is because it's not really something that affects you to the point where you need to be hospitalized. Right. And your body does have the ability to get rid of it on its own.
And could you say that to a certain degree, getting a cold actually helps your immune system?
Right. So, yes. So yes, exactly. So,
and it's an inconvenience. You're not going to die from a cold.
Well, yes.
Right.
I mean, definitely if you're immune compromised, or if there's some other issues that are going on in your body, if you have COPD, if you have lung disease, if you have real asthma that gets triggered by cold. So there are certain things that cold can do that can make you susceptible to certain things. Right. But you're right. It's something that your body does get used to and gets better and better at fighting. And the exposure does help. But with COVID, we don't want to run the risk of, really exposing people, because we don't know how it works on everybody's bodies.
Yeah, we don't play with dynamite. Play with dynamite.
Exactly. We're too early in it.
The whole thing has been like, parents bringing up kids. It's kind of counterintuitive. The mom says, no, we're not getting a dog. No, you can't go out and make mud pies in the backyard. All of those things that exposed us little by little to the germs that our immune systems could then overcome. So now we've had these sterile upbringings of children, and then all of a sudden a cold comes along and it wipes them out, because they've never had anything to really test that immune system.
No, there's a conversation about allergies, and that's a whole other conversation, and not being exposed to certain things, and the kind of correlation with raises or spikes and those types of pieces of data. But maybe besides that, I guess maybe just to segue in the last kind of moment or two we have here with you, Doctor. I know there was an announcement that was put out, not related to COVID, but in terms of some additional funding for mental health support staff on schools out on Long Island. So why do you think that's so important? I know we've discussed that issue with adults a lot, but also for your patients, who are under, adult age usually.
So there's no denying that our population, children included, adults, but definitely in the adolescent population, we saw a doubling in the amount of anxiety and depression compared to previous years. And one of the reasons was the remote learning and the isolation that took place during the COVID shutdown. And prior to COVID, we were seeing issues with in terms of mental health and depression and anxiety. Is social media a cause of it? So a lot of that, it was an ongoing issue, and COVID or the shutdown just brought it to a head, and it became much, much worse. Really, a large portion of our visits in the pediatric population became mental health issues, and still is currently. And so the funding from New York State and federal for the school districts to increase some of the staffing associated with possible, for example, guidance counselors, mental health providers, social workers in the school system is so important, because we know that there's such a difficult access to mental health care in our system, in our current medical system. It doesn't seem to be a priority. Mental health does affect our physical health, and it is treatable. It is something that we can do things for, but we need to have the proper access to care. And for school districts to be that sometimes number one or number two point of contact is really important. And it's really important to fund those initiatives. So we need that access for students and teachers to have, so that these things can get taken care of. And identification early is found to be helpful. Identifying a student that is suffering from depression or anxiety and gets treatment, whether that be therapy or medical treatment, does show that it improves outcomes in the long run.
There you go. So that is certainly important to consider. Like we said, not just the kind of traditional, health issues of colds and flus and obviously the COVID virus, but of course the mental health aspect. It's, maybe one thing that comes good of the situation is that there is a push for more resources for, not just the adult population, but for kids, because this is certainly, an important thing. And I know, I think you caught the end of our conversation before. We talked about the census data that just came out in Long Island. And maybe if you could just give, your closing thoughts in terms of, how that kind of plays into funding of programs like this, but also other kind of public health, strategies, whether it be on other vaccinations or other things that you and your colleagues, care about for your patients.
Well, yes. I mean, we need data, right? Everything's driven by data. And so by having a good census, or people filling it out accurately and having accurate numbers based on, just identifying what communities need more in terms of, housing, or what communities need more medical access to doctors, access to mental health care, access to food, access to grocery stores, not just fast food. Like there are areas even in Long Island where poverty and just access to healthy foods, children suffer. I mean, there's so many studies showing that if we just feed our children the proper foods, that'll improve their overall mental health, their physical health, and also improve their learning. So just knowing what districts are in need of, proper nutrition or access to healthy meals, those kind of things are all known from census data. And, getting the data is as important as kind of reviewing the data. You have to make sure that you have good data to begin with to start reviewing it and making conclusions from it.
Most definitely. And on that, we'll tell our listeners to certainly go ahead and if you're on social media, follow Dr. Sara Siddiqui at Dr. Sara, Sara, Siddiqui1, for, again, a lot of, the things that she's covering, her and her colleagues, those especially in the American Academy of Pediatrics. And certainly there's a lot of important information, and a lot of this stuff is very real time and fluid. So it's nice, when there's good information on social media with all that disinformation that's out there, of course, taking a lot of attention, then that direction. So thank you so much, Doctor.
That's why we talk to you, because you're the source. So
no, thank you. Really, thank you for having me. Thank you for having these important discussions. And we're here. We're here for you.
Yep,
that's
and
great.
Here for your patience. So thanks again, and
thank you very much.
Take care, be well, and look forward to talking to you again down the road.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. Well, in a story from Newsday by Scott Eidler, dated August 10th, 2021, Nassau County Executive Law vetoed a bill to give police and other first responders the right to sue under the county human rights law when they face discrimination from protesters or others. Curran cited a new opinion by the Office of State Attorney General Letitia James questioning the constitutionality of the bill, which the Nassau County Legislature approved August 2nd after a lengthy and divisive public hearing. In her veto letter to lawmakers, Curran acknowledged the genuine concern of community members that the law would intimidate free citizens from engaging in peaceful demonstrations without fear of retaliation. Curran continued, there is no consensus among elected officials and the public that this current legislation is necessary, carefully crafted, and without negative consequences. Rick Sawyer, James's special counsel for hate crimes, told Curran in a letter that the bill presents constitutional questions serious enough to guarantee multiple court challenges to its validity. Sawyer argued whether the law would survive such challenges is by no means clear, but the county would bear the full brunt of the cost of defending the law. Those costs and this law are unnecessary because the penal law and Nassau Administrative Code already provide an array of enhanced protections for first responders. Opponents say the proposed law could intimidate people seeking to protest peacefully. Well, representatives of a coalition, including the New York Civil Liberties Union, the NAACP, and the LGBT Network, testified against the legislation before it passed.
Yeah, Bill. This story has certainly been a major one. I know we've discussed a lot of the police reform issues with both, obviously, Commissioner Ryder, County Executive Curran, as well as some community advocates who certainly, and legislators who have pushed for, it to be more kind of, again, just more accountability, pushing for things like a civilian complaint review board, et cetera, et cetera. So this was seen as, since then, the most highly contentious issue related to, again, policing. And I know that, some have said that this, like you said, seems unconstitutional, and that seems to be what the AG's office has kind of agreed with potentially. But I do have to report that Newsday did say in a follow-up that Republican legislators who are the majority in the county's legislature are still strategizing on how they could potentially override Curran's veto. They apparently have 30 days from, it looks like, the 27th of next month, so of September 27th, to schedule a vote, which would actually line up, according to the reporting, about a week before the November 2nd election, for which every county legislator and County Executive Curran is up for re-election. So it's certainly not going away. I thought it might have been. I didn't actually think it was going to get this far, but it caught national and even some international press in terms of this situation, because it was very vague. And I think that the legislator, who actually is a Nassau County alum who sponsored this, thought that, maybe it won't go too far and he'll get credit within, a certain constituency, but wouldn't be the blowback that it's been. Maybe we'll have him on sometime to talk about, his thoughts on it, but certainly an amazing story. And, I think now at least we've hit the pause button, and we'll see if this is it. This is what activists don't want to see it go further, but we'll see.
In any event, I think the clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to move on out of here. We thank you for joining us and remind you that you can catch this week's Long Island News every Friday at 3 o'clock right here on 90.3 WHPC.